Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Parnell. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Angus Australia. I know many of you in the audience, and for those that I don't know, I look forward to meeting you one day. My job this afternoon is very simple. It's really to introduce our facilitator for the afternoon, and also to thank him and our panel of speakers for the afternoon. We decided to, in sponsoring Beef Australia, we decided to, rather than having a seminar session, we would have a question and answer session. And we're very fortunate. We got some very busy people that are very experienced in the northern beef industry and have had some interaction and some experience in the use or supply of Angus genetics into the north, and that's the theme of this afternoon's discussion, really, is the infusion of Angus genetics in the north. In recent years, as I'm sure you all know, there's been a lot of interest in the use of Angus in northern Australia. It has its particular challenges and, of course, many benefits, and that's why we've had a tremendous interest in Angus in the north. So my job, as I said, is very simple. I'm going to introduce our facilitator, Mr. John Condon. I'm sure that John will be known to the vast majority of you. John's one of Australia's most experienced agricultural journalists. In recent years, John and his partners have set up Beef Central, of which I know many of you would be subscribers of, a tremendous information source for the industry. John has, as I say, got tremendous experience. Those of you who have interacted with John knows he's one of his great expertise, great skills is extracting good information out of people, so that's why we thought we can't have anyone better than John to facilitate this session. Again, before I hand over to John, I want to thank John and our panel because, as I said, all very busy people, particularly in Beef Australia, where there's lots of things to do, lots of commitments, so we really appreciate you giving your afternoon to spend with us. And the whole idea is question and answers. I'm sure John will encourage you as the audience to ask lots of questions, and I would as well. That was the whole idea of the afternoon. So I'll hand over to John.
Cheers, thanks Peter. It's a pleasure to join you this afternoon for this topic. It's certainly the growth in interest in Angus cattle in northern Australia is a topic that we've monitored with great interest, and we've seen this magnificent growth in the use of Angus genetics across the southern Australian area over the last 20 years for very obvious reasons. The rate of uptake obviously is a lot slower in the north, but we can all see it gaining momentum for a whole range of reasons, many of which we will explore into this afternoon's session. So really, unlike some of the other seminars that I've already attended, and perhaps some that you have as well, the emphasis in this program this afternoon is going to be very much on interactive audience participation with the opportunity to ask questions, take some comments if you have them, on this broader topic of the penetration of Angus genetics into northern Australia, the challenges, the opportunities, the threats, the various things that you see as a group here today that we can talk about. I look around the room, I see people who cover a large geographic footprint of certainly the Queensland and Northern Territory cattle production areas. So we're talking about a very, very large cow population in terms of the potential engagement in an audience like this. And I'll also attempt, when the opportunity arises and where it's necessary, to throw to a few of you in the audience with particular expertise that I know in certain areas that can add to the discussion today. So we've got plenty of time for questions today. I'd just like to point out that Justin Boshammer does have a commitment starting at 3 o'clock, so if you do have any particular questions to ask to Justin, you might like to keep that in mind, that he'll have to leave us a little early. But for the rest of us, we do have an opportunity at 3:30, should we need that much time to discuss the topics you're interested in. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panellists today, and as I'm sure many of them are familiar with you already, but I think we've chosen 5 gentlemen here today who can touch on virtually every topic that this sort of audience is likely to want to embrace in a program like today. So let me just go through from the far end. We've got Justin Boshammer, of course, who'll be leading us early. And Justin, of course, is well known explained to you is that one of the principals at Sandy Angus on the Downs. The operation's grown from the space of chinchilla to now joining over 1,000 state and commercial breeders across 14,000 acres of country on the Western Downs. And of course, Sandy Benog's got clients, commercial clients, and other state clients across the area we're talking about in today's program. Next to him, we have Nick Cameron, who is the General Manager at Nindawimba, down near Bow Desert. Nindawimba, of course, breeds Ultra Blacks, Angus and Brangus, using modern breeding programs on a very, very large scale. And Nindawimba, of course, has become an industry showcase, particularly for international visitors coming to this part of the world within an hour's drive of Brisbane. It gives an awful lot of beef industry visitors getting a little snapshot of how the industry operates in this country. So Nick's been instrumental in the development of operations at Nindawimba. He's embraced the new technologies, implemented research and development programs with the goal of improving cattle breeding and the economic performance of herds. There's obviously a heavy emphasis on objective measurement, as there is across the entire Angus breed. Next to Nick, we have Troy Setter. Troy is Chief Executive Officer with Consolidated Pastoral Company. CPC is the largest privately owned cattle producer in Australia. Troy became Chief Executive, I'm going to guess, 18 months ago, Troy, or thereabouts? Sorry? 10 months. It seems much longer. He brings particular expertise, of course, in very large-scale commercial cattle production across the Northern Australian region in different environments. So he'll be able to talk about circumstances in the Northern Territory, in different parts of Queensland, and how they see that being impacted by Angus genetics. Dan Lynch is next. Dan may be known to some of you. He's a large-scale commercial cattle producer in the Cloncurry district. He's well known as an innovator in beef production systems. I think I did my first on-farm production story with Dan probably 20 years ago, and he continues to evolve his business in innovative and creative ways. His herd now is roughly 50% Angus and 50% Indicus. I'm going to ask each of the speakers to start with a little opening introduction, just to give you each a little bit of insight about their operations, and then perhaps sort of pose a question about a key sort of point that they see in terms of the topic that we're looking at discussing today, just to whet your appetite. Last of all, to my immediate right, Ced Wise. Of course, Ced is well known to many of you also as a leading artificial breeding practitioner. He's probably been doing embryo transfer longer than virtually anybody in this country, I would suspect. He's also a beef producer in his own right with his herd outside New Warwick, still, is that right? And he's obviously well equipped to handle any questions to do with the artificial breeding and breeding technologies associated with embedding Angus genetics in this northern area. So I'm going to start perhaps with Justin. We'll work our way down the list. Justin, if you would like to just, is your mic working okay?
Yep. Hello?
Okay, so if anybody can't hear well enough, please just raise your hands towards the back and we'll get our eye to you guys to see if we can improve that. But we'll just work our way down the list with a brief introduction, and then we'll get this Q&A session underway. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So we're a family operation based in Western Downs, and my father and his uncle started that business, the Angus herd, back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's been a fantastic sort of breed to be part of, and we really have to be thankful for a lot of what the society and other alliances they formed with feedlots and processes and whatnot to be able to come where it is. For Queensland, it's sort of only in more recent time that Angus has drifted further north, and while there's certainly some challenges that's been associated with taking
British cattle up through this country. It's been a bit of a trade as to how to make that work. So we've always wanted to understand our customers' requirements, and it's been part of that we drive around and have a look. And it's such a broad topic, Angus cattle in the north. I guess you call that border from the Queensland border. So there's a variety of production systems, and some of those systems are a lot easier for British cattle than other areas. So yeah, it's been great to drive around and listen to people and hear what their thoughts are, and hopefully those experiences can help you people here today to achieve what you want to do. Is that just about us? Or
yes, that's fine. If you do have a comment, just an opening remark, by all means, give us your sort of overarching sort of view on the state of play with Angus in Northern Australia. Otherwise, we can leave that till the questions come through.
Yeah, no, I think certainly. Yeah, if you want to make it work, you probably make it work. And it's a lot easier if you're trying to run a more intensive types of operation with control mania and rotation, grazing and whatnot, but with more extensive types of areas. That's where the challenges can increase, and hopefully we'll assist through those problems today.
Okay, thanks. Nick, Cameron, let's get a bit of insight into November.
Yes, can you hear me? Yep. My name's Nick Cameron. I'm the manager of November. So November is located just south of Brisbane in the Beaudesert area. It's a subtropical environment, and we do have a high tick load there. We currently run over 3,000 Angus, Ultra Black and Brangus at various percentages. Once weaned, all of our progeny run together in large contemporary groups of varying percentages. And Angus must run in those contemporary groups to give us linkage into the multi-breed register, which is the performance recording for Angus cattle at different content. We look at trying to introduce Angus as higher Angus content as we possibly can into our clients' operations, and try and do that by using the latest technologies in artificial breeding, as well as implementing our own R&D projects to discover and multiply animals that go to improve traits in the herds that they're delivered into. We've delivered bulls into many of Australia's pastoral companies and into many different environments in Australia. Since 2010, we have close to 3,000 of these bulls in operations throughout the country. So why Angus? Nindawimba was basically a clearfield site when Ewan Murdoch purchased the place. So we basically started from scratch when we were there. We did a contract with AA Company, which was a large embryo contract, and we were part of that with some other studs from down south, mainly Paringa, and then we sort of sat back and well, I was fortunate enough to go for some trips over to North and South America and observe what those countries were doing over there. And one thing became pretty clear to me that they were all turning black at a rapid rate, and countries' herds were moving closer to the equator. And I think this has become a global phenomenon. The other main advantage that Angus breed, and the way I see it has, is the volume of data that's been collected. The past and present breeders of Angus, mainly in the USA and Australia, certainly need to be commended for the Angus breed to where it is today. It's certainly been truly phenomenal, the growth of the breed worldwide. The breeders of the cattle, and I think this is sort of a point that gets lost a bit, but the breeders of the cattle are the ones that are ultimately responsible for the direction that breed travels. And if you observe the average genetic trends for Angus over the last 30 years, they basically have a blueprint for any breeder to follow. They're their genetic trends are just quite staggering as far as their performance goes. I think genomics will be the next major advantage the Angus breed has to offer the beef industry. It's been a long while coming, but the Angus breed really the only breed out there that do have a genomic product available. I see the role of genomics will be identifying desirable traits in the shortest possible time frame, and that therefore reduce generation interval, which when compared to other proteins is basically beef's Achilles heel. Cattle breeding takes a long time. Other proteins have grasped this genomic technology and have genetic gain that's far outstrips beef. So Mendewim is working with UQ, as I mentioned before. We do a lot of R&D on farm, and on genomics we've been running trials on pre-implant genetic diagnosis with some pretty promising results. So basically the aim is to take a biopsy of an embryo at 7 days of age and extract as much genomic information as we can. And the ultimate aim is to achieve a first graft on 7-day-old embryos. And obviously this will dramatically shift the bell curve and dramatically lower generation interval. Angus are a temperate breed, and as I mentioned earlier, the cattle population is moving closer to the equator. So to overcome some of these environmental issues, at Mendewim we fuse Angus with varying Boshammer percentages, and this helps overcome some of the challenging environmental issues. I will always recommend having the highest percentage of Brangus in the seed stock that are introduced though. So long as the bulls can do their job in the herd they are introduced, the F1 is the target for many of these operations. Getting the bulls into the environment where they're working as young as possible is also another key to introducing Angus and Angus-influenced genetics. I would recommend for all breeds of bulls, they should be introducing bulls, at a far younger age that's being introduced at present. This gives the bulls a lot longer to adapt to the environment, and they're able to handle the conditions a lot better when they're put to work, basically. As an example, one of our main customers, Georgina Pastoral Company, has been introducing bulls into their operation at Lake Nash at 9 months of age. So they're delivered up there at 9 months, and then they've been joining them at 14 months of age. So they are young bulls, but they're going over 2 to 2.5-year-old high content heifers. So the results to date on that have been quite outstanding. I mean, Angus are renowned for libido, basically. Management of bulls at this age can be critical and could add to the workload of an operation, so it's always something to consider, but the resulting F1s have a significantly better fertility and also give producers an exposure to markets that may have otherwise been closed to. So that's basically a snapshot.
Great, thanks, Nick. And now we'll hear from Troy Setter from CBC.
Thanks, John. CBC have got a reasonable Angus exposure. I suppose not too big a properly run herd, but we run a small Angus stud multiplier. Western long reach is it's about 600 Angus cows. So we buy size into that and multiply them out. They basically then send Angus bulls through Northern Australia, Queensland, ENT. We haven't got any Angus bulls in WA at the moment. I agree with Nick about sending bulls young north, and I think that's something that for seed stock producers it can be a challenge at times to let bulls go at 6 months or 9 months of age, but I'm a pretty firm believer that April, May you should be sending young bulls north if you want them to breed that wet season or even the wet season after. Data loss can be a challenge, but if you want that bull to get a good life out there, they need to grow up and at least get a wet season under their belt. I've certainly found, before they breed or if they're early maturing. So we've predominantly been running our Angus program as a terminal program. So we've got Angus bulls that are a couple of 100 k's northwest of Cairns in pretty trying conditions. We've got ultra black bulls there through Western Queensland and then well and truly into the Northern Territory, above and below the tick line. For us, don't want to get into a debate about ultra black or Angus, but we see similar performance, I suppose, on some of those different cattle. But it's all good performance. Not saying it's negative, but by any means, both go well. We're just starting to challenge whether we put some of the Angus back into the maternal side of the cross. So we've often had a Chardonnay cow with an Angus bull over the top, or a Brahman cow with an Angus bull. That's been from terminal, looking at how do we get that into a more maternal side, so we increase productivity, increase fertility. There is some heat challenges with black cattle in Northern Australia. Some are manageable, some are hard to manage. And we've got some red Angus content in a couple of birds that have come in other crosses, which are performing quite well. So just quickly, we operate 2 feedlots in Indonesia, in a joint venture. One's in Medan and one's in Lampung, so we've got both ends of Sumatra. The market up there and the feedlot really like the Angus cattle, the Angus cross cattle. In terms of AEG, FCE, overall performance, customer compliance, black hide, all those things are positive. We have fully shedded feedlot sheds up there. We've got 2 sheds we've just put fans in, exactly pretty much the same as these big fans, to help with the cattle up there. But as long as the cattle are sleek coated and well inducted, we've had some really pleasing performance. But one of the challenges is that getting bulls young enough that can go north. And I think one of the things that the northern breed of cattle and breeders of cattle really need is fertility. I think Angus have a role there, but fertility is driven by early maturing, easy doing, well covered cattle. And I often look at some of the terminal Angus that are pushed at us into northern Australia with a bent about them being good for maternal. I mean, there is no way that a 1,400 kilo bull is going to breed us with cows in northern Australia. We're resisting it for our operation, might suit others, but feedback from us is we do not need cows that 700-800 kilos in northern Australia. We need cows with 450 kilos lactating.
Okay, thanks for it. Now we can work our way down this line.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I've got about a 3,500 LSU breeding operation north of Cloncurry in northwest Queensland. Developed fairly well into 1.5 kilometre grazing radius, so I can utilise the pasture. Produced there in a 400 mil rainfall belt, 16 to 24 inches, so it's pretty easy country to produce animals in. The last 3 years, admittedly, that's been an average of 100 mil, so that's been a bit of a challenge, but we'll get through that. 2013, it forgot to rain and had to truck about 110 decks up to southeast of Catherine, and on adjustment, and that country up there is a 700 to 900 mil rainfall belt, so quite a challenge to produce in. Stage 3 pasture and low crude protein through the dry and digestibility. In March this year I purchased that property, mainly because I had most of the bloody cattle there anyway, so might as well move north, and that's where the opportunities are. You might say, what has this got to do with Angus genetics? Well, in northwest Queensland at Tara, the home place, sort of what I knew, I'd achieved the optimum in weaning percentage over a 14-year period, about 64% on average weaning out of a predominantly Brahman-based breeding herd, and that was in a 63-day control mate. In 2011, the live export ban hit, depressed the market, as everybody knows, for all types of cattle everywhere, and more so for Boss Indicus cattle going to the southern market. You couldn't give them away, let alone sell them. So I thought, well, I had to change something to sort of meet those challenges, and genetics was my obvious choice. So through a fixed time AI program with the aid of Dr. Sophie Edwards, Dr. Brian Burns, Braithwaite, and Greg Fawcett and team, we inseminated 600 cows and heifers artificially with predominantly Angus semen. Why Angus semen? Because the selection availability for the traits we required for Northern Australia was available from the Angus studs, and the depth of data to support those traits is unprecedented. And those traits are obviously fertility, growth, fine-coated, medium, mature body weight cows, and all I thought was we're chasing poles to get away from cutting horns off and the animal welfare issue. So what I felt we achieved was adaptability within the breed. That is, they were bred in the environment that they had to perform in, which is so important. It's not unlike Nick sending those bulls up at 5 to 6, 7 months old. They have to go into Northern Australia prior to when you want them to serve cows, because there's no way in the world they can come from a temperate environment and perform. However, breeding them there, I think, has an added advantage. Breeding them there as a calf and then raising them, as Troy would probably agree, from the Longridge environment, which is the same as what they've got current. The Angus Society and studs have just been excellent to deal with in helping select semen, support and understanding in what we're trying to do has been great. Just on an industry overview, in Northern Australia, north of the line from Broome to Rocky, we've got about 16 million head of cattle, and the potential, it was brought up yesterday, with the chap from the CEO of Elanco there said, to meet this future demand that supposedly is going to come, we're running out of resources, and the only way we can push it is through genetics. Well, in a sense, what we've got available to us in Northern Australia is we have got resources that have not been tapped to their full potential, far from it, and we certainly have just started on genetics with increasing fertility. We've got a lot of room to move. So, in my opinion, we have got the potential to take the production in Northern Australia of total number of cattle from about 16 million to 21 million very sustainably, and the only way we're going to do that is through genetics and an infusion of capital and knowledge. So we've got an exciting 10 years ahead of us, because there may be a more lucrative period in returns. So therefore we will have some cash from within our businesses and possibly from outside our businesses to inject and meet the supposed future demand. And I think there's not suppose, it will be there. It's just a matter of positioning ourselves to meet that demand. But I think in doing that, what we need is a joint approach from us as commercial cattle producers, seed stock producers, financiers, and commodity buyers, that if we can work together more closely in achieving those aims. And why I say that is, for injection of capital, for example, we need some alliances so we can have certainty in budgeting, so then we can inject money into our assets to meet that future demand. So if we could build alliances with commodity buyers, with our seed stock producers, and that gives our banks certainty, we have got the potential to go towards meeting some of this future demand that's going to eventuate. So, in summary, if you'd like, I think the next 10 years, as I said, we will be the best opportunities in the beef industry that I've ever been involved with, and that's since 1976. So we have got some better times to look forward to compared to the past.
Thanks, Dan. That's totally right. So just to finish off this first introductory remarks, let's hear from Ced Wise.
Thank you, Don. Now, John Tedder from Southern Queensland, from Stanthorpe. We run a family farm. We run about 1,000 cows, 400 registered Angus cows and 600 Brahma cows, and we use our own auto. That's my hobby, and I also have a veterinary business that's 100% cattle repro oriented. Cattle centre at home, and another one here at Rocky Repro. And I travel all over Australia doing embryo transfer, basically from Cairns to Victoria. And some New Caledonia, a lot in New Zealand, and a bit in Indonesia. Before I go any further, I should say that I feel a little bit like a bloody weekend fossicker amongst the mining giants into my right here, but I'll say my 2 blocks worth anyway. I thought, just as a lot of these other panellists have said, when I was asked to do this, I thought I should at least educate myself a little bit on what is the market, what are we looking at here. And nearly all of you, it'll be first-hand knowledge, but I'll just share with you some of the stats that I come up with. I should add that these stats I've got mostly from the ABS, and I would caution reading too much into it, especially if any of you are as good at filling out the ABS surveys as I am. I don't put a lot of thought into it. But anyway, there's about 28 million head of cattle in Australia, as we all know. A couple of million of those are dairy cows. We slaughter about 8 million head a year, and we live export about 1.3. So we turn off about 9 million head a year, as I can find out. That's in Australia. So what's Northern Australia? If you come from Victoria, Northern Australia starts about where I live, right on the New Zealand-Victorian border. If you're from where I live, Northern Australia starts about here. So if we look at the cattle numbers there, just as Dan has done, in Northern Australia we've got about, I've come up with 16 million, which is around about half the Australian in Northern Australia. If we look at North, that's sort of from here north, half of Northern Territory and half of Western Australia, then I come up with 10 million head of cattle, most of which, a big percentage of which are in the ticks. Interesting to note that there's more cattle within 300 k's of where we're sitting here in a semicircle than there are in the Northern Territory and in the northern half of Western Australia put together. So you are at the beef cattle of Australia right here. One of the majority of the markets for northern cattle is here, including all of Queensland, the northern half of Western Australia and a fair chunk of the territory. First of all, we've got JAPOLs, we've got EU and a live trade. Now I know there's pastoral companies within these areas that have their own branded beef that are for outside those markets, but the majority of cattlemen that family farms anyway are dealing with those markets. The JAPOLs today is worth about 410 to 420 a kilo, I guess. The specs are pretty broad. They want them up to 280 to 420 kilos. Dead weight, 0 to 8 teeth. No requirements for fat colour, really. There's no marbling requirements. EU, they're 260 plus kilos. They're paying 490 a kilo right now, carcass weight. Teeth 0 to 4, no marbling, no HGP. The live trade's an interesting one, and as Dan said, when it was squashed, it's still put a lot of pressure on all of us all over Australia. As I say, we export about 1.13 million head of cattle a year, but over 1 million of those are feeder and slaughter steers, so that's about 80% of our live cattle exports. The rest is made up of some dairy and a few breeder cattle. In Northern Territory, West Australia and Queensland supply 960,000 of those live of the feeder cattle, feeder slaughter cattle. So that's 96% of them. So nearly all come from the north. 64% of all those feeder cattle go in Indonesia, and 70 to 80+%, depending on the year, go into Indonesia and Southeast Asia combined. All they want is 260, 300 kilo live cattle. When it gets to Indonesia, which is our major market, about 83% of that ends up either in the wet market or manufacturing. So there's no real requirement for any good cuts of meat there. And as of last week, I think they were paying 260x Darwin for those live steers. So that's comparable to what we're getting in here for the rest of it. So in summary of the live trade, it is probably the most important market from north of Australia. It's also a very significant market for Northern Australia, and by proxy is a significant market for all Australia. And the price is comparable to the southern markets. I think there's been plenty of studies done by guys in the DPI on profitability. There's some second line, real good studies done. And basically the summary of that is that you've got to get as much weight on the cattle as you can with cover and your highest weaning weight. That's the profit drivers. Weight, enough cover on it to kill them, and as many cows as you can get on the ground. Now I fully understand that consumers' preference for beef is determined from the tenderness, flavour and juiciness, and marbling certainly has a role to play in the flavour and juiciness part of that. And also that the profitability to the retailer is dependent on your beef retail yield. Right now, there isn't, for the northern producers, there's not enough, or there isn't any price directive for producers to get their quality of beef better, and I think that's a failing in the industry. We need to address that. And that, when these comments are made from a northern cattleman's perspective. What is the environment in the north? Again, it depends on what you define as north. If we look at north from here north, it's a wet dry season. The average annual maximum temperature I found out is between 36 and 39 degrees. That's average daily temperature. The average mean temperature across the year, that's maximum temperature, so the average mean temperature across the year is somewhere between 24 to 33 degrees. So when you get into the north, it's bloody hot, there's no denying that. And there's not that much good when you get down here. The average maximum temperature across the year is somewhere between 27 and 29 degrees, and average mean temperature 21 to 33. So it's hot, there's ticks, and there's a very distinct wet dry season. It's not used to anyone. So for Angus cattle to survive up here, they've got to handle that environment, and they've got to handle ticks. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of there are any Angus studs in the country, and I'd love to see some, because I'm sure within the Angus population there are cattle that are more tick resistant than others, as there are in a lot of other breeds. And it'd be good to put Angus cattle under that pressure to be able to select them. Crossbreeding with Angus bulls, there isn't any heterosis or carcass characteristics, but so you'll just get the mid-parent average, so you need to get the best. If you're looking for a better quality meat, you need to get the best carcass characteristics out of your Angus bull. You're not going to get any heterosis gains. But the crossbreeding through heterosis does give you huge gains, obviously, for fertility and half survival. That's what Dan was saying. So we've got to introduce the Angus genetics into the northern population somehow that they survive. Fixed on AIR is a great way of doing it. I reckon that's the way. Otherwise, as other panelists have said, the management to get Angus bulls into the north has got to be very, very good. It can be done, but it's not just tip them out and forget it. That won't work in the north. So in summary then, what are the advantages of Angus? Firstly, the poll. That's a big advantage, I think. and they're black, which I think is only managed that is to give you a consistent line. All your cows will be black, and whether we like it or not, get good lines. Then I should qualify all that by saying, are they the best at marbling? Well, no. If you want marbling, then you should be using wagons. Are they the best temperament? Probably not. They're fine, but the old polar is hard to beat. You can't keep them out of your road. There's probably other breeds that are just as good, but we're fine, but we're not great, not the best. Are we the best growth? Probably not. On an average, Charolais are better growers, Romanolas are better growers, probably better growers. Are they best adapted to the northern environment? Hell no. Nowhere near it. We've got Brahmins, we've got all the Brahmin crosses, Brangus, Sanders, Drought Masters, Xenopols, Ponsmaras are all better adapted to that environment than Angus. But having said that, Angus they're great all-rounders, and their first crosses I think make a beautiful cow. And the problem for producers like Dan, I think, is to where to go after you make the first cross. I think what to come back with. Do you come back with Brangus? You come back with Brahmin, Xenopols, Murray Greys, or whatever. You need to determine what cross you come back over your first cross female, and that cross I think will depend entirely on the environment. So you're in the real north and you've got pit problems, steep wet dry season, high protein, no protein type deal. You're going to have to come back from all those Angus. If you're in, say, out of the tip line here in central Queensland, you can probably come back with another Angus or another British bred cow that gives you greater access to the higher end markets for your beef. So that's more. So I mean, my own little bit of experience putting Angus bulls over Brahman cows, this would be my advice to Angus breeders is we don't have an NPV for bone, but don't forget about the bone because they run out into what all my northern clients would refer to unkindly as having the bone of an animal that constantly runs around the desert. I think that's the correct way of saying it. They get very fine bone and you can't play on it. That's what it's doing.
Great, thank you, as you said. Look, I think that's given everybody a nice little snapshot of information to whet your appetites in terms of some Q&A work. So we will have some roving mics wandering around the room, and we'd prefer if you could use the mics rather than call out your questions, just primarily so that the other delegates can hear what the question was. So we'd like you to, particularly for your first question, you might identify yourself by name and perhaps location, just to give our speakers a little bit of guidance as to how they might direct their question to you. Feel free to pose questions specifically to one or more of the speakers. If you don't offer that, well, I might perhaps make a call on who's best to open the batting, and then if others want to contribute to that particular question, they can. So I think probably what we should do, just listening to these opening remarks, is let's try to work from the big picture issues down, because I'm sure you have lots of very specific questions that talking about terminal versus maternal crossbreeding strategies and that sort of thing. But perhaps we could just open with some very broad sort of discussion about the role or potential role of Angus cattle. I'd just like to get the ball moving by saying the impact of the season in this area of Northern Australia in the last 2 years. Obviously the endowed areas closer to the coast, seasons have been a little better, but you don't have to go all that far from here west and north to run into some country which is in horrible trouble once again. I'm just wondering what the impact is in terms of the appetite for the broader commercial industry and these larger herds further north and west, influenced by the current seasonal conditions they're going through. We all know that it's a 2-3 year cycle before these calves are turned off, but is there an impulse there within northern breeders? Are we seeing the interest perhaps waning a little at the moment because of the seasonal conditions the area is going through? Justin, do you have a comment to start off with on that?
Certainly, well, it's had an impact right across the board, whether you're an Angus breeder or a Brahman breeder, but yeah, it'll be interesting how it all plays out, given, it's a little hard to to know what will happen. Classic cases the other day, or yesterday, told a very nice story of how it's all gone and played out. Only last weekend I promised 95% chance of 2 to 4 inches around 7 mils. So, you know, you're going to be a little bit hesitant what might be eventuate. But yeah, it'd be nice to think that, yeah, we're in for a really good run ahead of us. And, but just how that will play out. I mean, there's 2 ways you can compete. You can compete on cost and be as efficient as you like, or you can also value add what you're doing. And whether the equilibrium is going to change a bit now back to the more efficient system, because there's just so much demand now and people can roll the more Angus type sort of animals through, so to speak, and not as much pressure on the value added. I'm not sure, but it's probably nice to have a bit of a foot in each boat, just foot in each door, just to diversify what you're doing, because we don't want, don't want to go through what just happened, I guess. But it'll be interesting how it all plays out, and we'll see what happens.
What about you, Dan? Your country's in pretty bad shape this year again. Do you see at a local, regional level interest in Angus genetics changing during a dry year compared to the 2 wet years you had a couple of years earlier?
There has been certainly limited interest. I wouldn't say, exceptional interest, but that's understandable because people have been in obviously survival mode, just getting through the drought, and secondly, they've, versed in a lot of breeders, so their bull requirements haven't been as great in any breed, let alone thinking about changing to Brangus, or Angus. I just feel, be it Angus or whatever, the emphasis will be on mine seed stock that have got some data behind them, so we can actually get a higher carbon percentage. That's where Northern Australia has got a lot of gain to be made, and whether it's Angus or some other breed, it just so happens that Angus has got the data there, the depth of data, as I mentioned, to be able to accelerate, be it through, it doesn't have to be through fixed time AI, it can be just by buying bulls from Temperate Australia, but making sure you get them out of the paddock and take them up there and acclimatise them, and then the seed stock suppliers, I think, be willing to then morphology test them, in 6 or 12 months later, so we get a product that is really first class. And that doesn't, as I said, it doesn't have to only happen in the Angus breed. If it would happen in the other breeds, then that would be a big plus in addressing our reproduction.
We've already had a couple of comments from the panel highlighting one of the big advantages of the Angus breed being the selection pressures through objective measurement. But I'm just wondering, the Northern Australian market generally is much less focused on breed plan and EVPs. Just wondering, how does the Angus industry engage with northern bull riders in terms of their level of interest in EVPs? Nick, we might start off with you with a comment on this. Is it something which is almost a lost cause, or is there a growing interest because they're aware that the Angus cattle have got a lot of objective data behind them? Is it something that they're now more prepared to embrace than they would be if they were buying perhaps an Angus type animal?
Yes, no, that's an interesting one. But basically, I see the role of EVPs as a tool for the majority of its use is for stud selection, so it's for in-house use. There is a little bit of use for marketing, but I believe EVPs are getting far too complicated for people that aren't in the game, so to speak, on a daily basis. We've actually changed some of our catalogues when we do have sales to reflect that. So you might go for heifer bulls or maternal bulls. So, yeah, the performance data has to be gathered, and it has been gathered by Angus, and like I was saying before, they've done an absolutely superb job at collating that. I mean, there's more Angus cattle performance reported now in Australia than all the other breeds put together, so they're a powerful, and that is a powerful tool to use for selection and breeding purposes. It would be nice for some sort of education on EBVs, but my gripe with EBVs is they're very complex. You've got different units of measurement over all different types of EBV, and negative can be good or positive can be good. So it does get a little bit confusing, I think, for say a bull buyer that might be turning up to a sale, for instance, or going through some bulls in the pen. But basically, if they came to us and said we want bulls with a -4 gestation, we can select those bulls out, draft those bulls out, and they're up for selection. So yeah, I do think at this stage it's a breeder's tool.
Okay. Troy, perhaps we might just get an extension from you on that. I mean, what's the ideal in terms of the CPC breeding program for an Angus bull going to your country, say in the Blackwell or the Isonsford area versus further north? You sort of that?
Certainly from I suppose we've been on with personal delivery, objective measurement, EBVs, and I think there's much more scope to use and promote EBVs broadly across all breeds in Northern Australia. And objective measurement. But for us, I suppose, we want ease of calving is important because we don't calf check. We have uncontrolled joining where we segregate on pre-test, so ease of calving is important. But too small a calf is a problem as well, particularly long distances. And cattle that go long distances from water. Our country is not as developed as we like, and calves can get up and walk. We've got to be careful with hybrid here though, with Angus over Brahma and then brown Brahma back over Angus as well, depending on how that plays out. But for us, mature cow weight is really important. If we're picking a Messiah, if you're going to a stud, or a replacement bull, and we're trying to pick, probably not as big a problem with the Angus cattle, but certainly with Brahman cattle, negative days to calving. So Northern Australia has a very big problem with lactational anestrus through many years of uncontrolled joining, and the only way to fix that is a sharp knife, and to stop putting cattle in that have got that have got positive days to calving. So if you want to get more calves on the ground in a 12-month period in Northern Australia, you've got to get reproductive disease and nutrition under control, and you've got to get days to calving under control. So a cow having a calf every year is the best way bottom line. So I suppose a little bit different to Nick, but I prefer to weigh in objective measurement. I know Nick does as well, but from and Jason who looks after our lead genetics is here. We talk about EBVs. It is balancing as a tool. It's important to us in terms of type of cattle. If we're going into the tick country, certainly want slick cattle, slick-coated cattle. That can be a challenge with Angus cattle. Not all of them. Part of that's also just what age they head north. And then also, they're not the easiest cattle to walk in hot conditions. Plenty of us are struggling here. It's not that hot here. You want to get out in 50 degrees in Western Queensland in November in second round and try and push a black bull for 15 k's for the day. It's doing anyone's opinion. You've got to have the ability to walk and move. And, again, that comes back to young cattle going up in Northern Australia, but also cattle that are free and easy to walk, well structured. It's certainly important. If we're going to look on a maternal side, it's really important to on fertility again, and also the chip cow weight. John, probably an area that's changing rapidly is the acceptance in Northern Australia as live export markets for different breeds other than grey Brahmans and black points. And we've seen Indonesia with once it went over 500,000 to 600,000 head, they've got to look at other breeds, other composites, other crosses of cattle. Most of the feedlots are very good at measuring individual animal performance up there. They're doing work on breeds and yield, supply yield, producer yield, on phenolitis or firebrand. And we're
that performance monitoring extending beyond yield and growth rate into meat quality? I mean, is there any sign of a meat quality orientation in the Indonesian market yet?
It's retail. It's retail per field, is one of the descriptions. So we sell cattle every afternoon in Indonesia, 365 days a year, and they are then processed into a market. That carcass is weighed. The butcher who buys that carcass weighs it out to basically weighs everything out, hide, bone, whatever. And we don't pay on yield. We still sell live cattle, but if we sell poor performing cattle today, we will be smacked with a price negotiation tomorrow. So those guys are very, very sensitive to yield, and it reflects in the next day's conversation very, very quickly. And so I think there's a role for Angus cross cattle in Northern Australia because of some of the yield advantages. But meat quality is about lean beef. The challenge with that, I know it's a bit conflicting, is we don't want our heifers too lean. But the feeding system in much of Southeast Asia is 5 to 8 mils of fat is more than enough because it's predominantly wet cooking. You've got loin cuts and other cuts, predominantly wet cooked, or thin slice cooked if it's dry cooked, and so it doesn't have to be loaded up with.
Okay, look, let's see if we can find some questions from the audience. Does anybody like to break the ice? There we go. Leading Nickel over here from Jalaka, an Angus breeder of somewhere now.
Yes, well, I haven't been buying many Angus bulls as I've had in the past, but fortunately Justin Boshammer lives next door now, and the fence is between us and him a bit wonky, and when his bulls come over, I don't hurry to get them out of there, actually. So, Justin, you're going to have to do something about that fence. Dan Lynch, good day, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good, lad. Good to see you.
I noticed that you got into cattle in 1976. I did too. I bought a bob of Malapunyas with Murray Cameron and John Lanham. We used to fly around up in Mount Isa in those days. But I've just got some contemporary figures for the 50-day weigh-up at the paddock to plate the grass day. And they can only weigh half of them because the cattle started to stress in the heat and the mud.
Just let me explain, Lee, before you go on. Lee's referring to the 100-day grain-fed carcass competition, which is attached to the Brisbane show, which is in fact a feedlot weight gain plus meat quality and meat tenderness test. It's a true chain test program. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just assumed that everybody would know about the RNA having to come with the competition. Because it is billed as the premier cattle assessment competition. I think it probably is actually. But they've weighed the cattle at 50 days, and they can only weigh half a tent because they've had 4 inches of rain down there, and it was muggy and that way the rest of the day, poor buggers. But anyway, what I'm leading up to is that John Brownlee's short horns, 3.46, my Angus short horn cross cattle are doing 2.95 and 2.79. But when those cattle, I know my cattle will grade well with the Angus contribution to them. When they're killed at JBS, we're only going to get the same money for them as people that are feeding 100% Brahman cattle in that competition. And where do we go? Well, how do we go forward in getting better, premium for our cattle that presumably have higher meat eating qualities? And John, you are on one of the foodies that get on the meat eating testing part of that, the MSA component. So it always intrigues me that you can breed these cattle with the good carcass attributes and high growth rate, and you still end up with just the same 100-day fed money as 100% by syndicates. Anybody like to comment on where we go with that?
I'm going to go straight to Troy on that one. I suppose the broader question is it's about price recognition in breeds for 100-day cattle, and possibly even grassfeeds. Where there's absolutely no marbling campaign and a 100-day grain fed bed, to my knowledge, in Northern Australia. Are the processors working hard enough to send the price signals?
Good, thanks, John. Are the processors working hard enough on that one? But it's a little bit, but I think I don't disagree that basically at the end of the day, it's retail beef that is the final, or restaurant beef, that's the final real cash payment. So as worker, you really only sell something once terminally, and then you work back and you have as many hands as you want. But it's all about retail beef on the plate, and then work back. So I think that there should be payment differences for cattle that yield better than others. Now, we've got to measure that objectively, and it needs to be standard, which has always been a challenge. And it's good to see through the revision of the AusMeat language that there is talk about retail beef measuring. There's some work done with cameras at the moment that's looking pretty good. I think, without being too pushy to bring the processor back into it, there's a unique opportunity. The Australian herd is probably below 26 million head now. The US herd is down 30-something million head. Chinese herd is down similar numbers, if not more, and demand is up. So if there is ever a time to start to negotiate and talk about different ways of transacting carcasses, now's the time. The producer doesn't have a better time than they've ever had to start to talk about. These are different ways that we should be transacting carcasses and beef. Paid on marbling, paid on yield. I'm a big fan, big believer. And now's the time as an industry we should get together. I'm not saying it's a fight with the processors by any means, but it's time to work together with the meat processors and say, let's get more sophisticated, let's pay on quality, let's pay on yield. Those that perform well get paid, those that don't. And it'll be the best incentive to create a better industry. So that's my view on it.
Anybody else? Dan?
Well, John, just to comment in the sense of leveraging off that data that Lee's got. I mean, obviously those cattle performed exceptionally well. Then another way to leverage off that would be to identify the genetics that they were produced from and multiply those genetics. There would be, or should be, people around that would be quite happy to get those genetics because of the results you got from that trial. So, it's not only maximising the money from those animals, but it's identifying what those animals came from and perpetuating that.
Anybody else?
Lee wants to hear. He'll tell me what he's done.
I'm sorry, Troy, you didn't really answer the question. When are we going to get paid for meat quality unless you have a special deal with somebody that's supplying a brand? We're still going to get the generic price for all the genotypes. Troy said that we need to talk to processors, but who's going to do that? How are we going to get a premium for cattle that meet higher meat carcass and meat eating specifications? I can't see how it really is going to happen broadly for the industry unless you work for a big company and have got a bit of sort of commercial muscle to get a special rate for your cattle that might be a force-for marbling and have a high yield component. I've been a great fan of Bioscan, and it was going to come in 15 years ago, and it hasn't come in, and it's still pie in the sky. So where do we go from here? Will we see any of the changes that I'm talking about before they put me 6 foot under? I doubt it.
I suppose to answer it differently, from a feedlot point of view, being an ex-feedlotter and current feedlotter in Indonesia, we will pay more for cattle and game. So if your cattle perform like that, and we've got performance data on like that, we don't publicly come out and say this is what he gets, this is what the other person gets, but on feedlot performance, if your cattle perform or don't perform, it's reflected in the price. In terms of yield, yield is still a bit subjective with the measurement that is there, but we get rewarded or discounted on broad yield numbers with different lines of cattle. So crossbred cattle and composite cattle we'll pay more for because we can extract more for them in the market. In terms of in the broader industry and getting more money for a yield-based carcass payment system, no one is going to do it for us. It's up to producers to do it. So is that the role of the Angus Society to go to look at what their role is, or is it the role of the Cattle Council or a group of producers to just get on? I mean, the only people who are going to change it for the producers. So it's time for all of us. If we want to structure the way we get paid differently, is to unite and get on with it. No one's going to do it for us. No, it's cold hard. That's my cold hard view on it, is we've got to get up and do it ourselves. There's no other industry where you'll get a leg up, so we shouldn't expect the beef industry. We need to get on and do it ourselves. No one's going to wait for us.
Okay, sensible comment.
Well, I think, in my humble little view, it depends on how much beef those processors are selling for a steak on the plates. I mean, if 100% of the beef was to go to hamburger beef, if that was the market, meat quality will be nothing other than the attributes that already said. Retail beef yield gain, weight gain, net feed efficiency is a huge thing. I think we're going to look at as much as we should. But just the quality of the beef market and its flavours, all that, if 100% goes to hamburger, they're not going to pay us for having a great steak, are they? You know? So it depends on the demand of that high-end cut. It all goes to restaurants, and I'm sure we can demand a lot better premium, but at the moment that's not how it's happening.
You look at producers in the US are rewarded on yield grade, or feedlots, the ultimate self-carcass are rewarded on yield grade, so it's not something's practiced in other Western meat processing.
Yeah,
production companies, yield grade is paid, and farming is rewarded in plenty of other countries. Now, there is some meat processors that will try and pay on yield, and some that do pay on farming in Australia. Just fine, but if we want to get the whole industry transacting differently, it'll be up to the industry to propose and unite behind it other way.
Let's hope the Osmic Language Review will explore some of these topics and perhaps take some of these points out a little. And the process's response to yield-based payment systems is always been, give us a system where we can absolutely rely on its accuracy, offer a much broader range of cattle. Of course, it must be said that what we see in the US fed cattle industry. I think their appetite to adopt them will certainly be a lot greater. So let's move on to another question. Sonia's got one down the back.
Question I suppose probably for Ced. Ced, one of the things I'm a Medfield boy at Angus, we produce some bulls that head north. Question for Ced, one of the things we struggle with our program is the fact that in the past, I'm on a slightly different tangent, the DPI have done a very good job of getting information from northern producers on bull morphology. And I'm just wondering, I struggle with it as to whether there is actually any scientific data that there is a morphology issue with British or European bulls, and whether morphology testing is really required in those breeds.
I'd like to thank you very much for that question, Ben, but I don't quite much. I think I might, as of this moment, resign from the Australian Government's Australian Veterinary Association and probably the Angus Society. But my view on morphology is different to my colleagues in a lot of ways, and I know it will be different to Dan's. And this is my honest opinion. Morphology, as I do it, for bull breeders, you do it at home, they go often multi-unit sale, or they want through their own sale, boxed up with other cattle, trucked north. The repeatability of that morphology is not good. We do a lot of morphologies pre-sale. You can do the same animal after it's been through the sale process, trucking, boxing, all that sort of stuff, different environment. And the morphologies are totally different. We've got plenty of bulls in the centre that have, in fact this year in Rocky Creek Road there, 100% of the bulls that were morphology tested prior to sale had not produced, and it's only a few bulls, but they have not produced a straw scent. The other bulls that weren't morphology tested, we've got some have and some haven't. It was not a guarantee, because they were morphology tested, it did not guarantee that they were going to be good produces at the other end. And a very small subset this year was 0. Morphology on a per ejaculate basis, I'm 100% behind the science. I'm sure that's fine, and that's why we test it. Do a morphology test on every ejaculate that we freeze out here. And I'm 100% confident of that. I think in a situation like Dan's here, where you bring your herd bulls out of a paddock, do the morphology, and redo that next year, the people tell me that it is more highly repeatable, and I'm not doubting that. If you bring them out of your paddock, put them through your yards, put them out of your paddock, and bring them back next year, I'm not doubting that. The problem I have is that I don't think that on an individual bull basis that is sold through a bull sale, it is repeatable enough to bank on. And I've written plenty of articles before saying I think either the morphology story has been oversold or overboard, and I believe that because I get too many people coming to me and saying, if I do a morphology test and he passes, that's it, he's good for life. And I can guarantee you that is not the case. And vice versa, if I do a morphology test now and he's no good, then that's it, chop his head off. And I also know that is not the case. We've had in the centre there, bulls that have come in, you get 1, 2, 3 ejaculates for freezing. The first ejaculate fails on morphology, the second ejaculate is fine. And so there's a lot of variability in there. And on top of that, on that CRC data, which is what we're all hanging our hat on, and say if it's above 70% morphologically normal, then he will, if it's above 70% morphologically normal, he'll give you above average number of calves. That's right. If it was between 50 and 70, about 70% of the bulls that were 70% or better morphologically normal gave above average number of calves. Between 50 and 70, if they were above average morphology, they gave, the group between 50 and 70% morphology were 50-50. Half of them give better lot of calves, half didn't. Below 50%, then none of them gave above average number of calves. My argument is that in that, if you look at the individual bulls in that data set, those that were 70% or better, there was still a whole bunch of bulls that gave at least 0 calves, 4, 5 or 6 of them. And so it wasn't a guarantee in that data either. So if they're 70% or better, sure, they're a better chance. But if they're 50 to 70%, 50-50, if they're below 50 on that bull, they're low chance of getting above average number of calves. So as a veterinarian that goes out to your place or anybody else's place to see and test bulls, and you say, oh, well, he's 70% morphologically normal, he's 80%, therefore, man, I can guarantee he's going to be a good bull. That's not true. He's a better chance, but he's not a guarantee. And then you put that on top of the fact that you're doing it for sale, go through all sales and come down the other end, and the morphology changes, of course. So it's something that I struggle with on a individual bull pre-sale. That's my answer, man.
Thanks. I'm just looking at Justin, who's going to be leaving us in the next couple of minutes. So if anybody has a seed-stock producer type question, or Justin, of course, is also on the South Queensland Regional Beef Research Committee. If anybody wants to get a quick question into Justin, now's your opportunity. One down the back there.
Mick Kingham from Jones Towers. We've used Angus bulls over the last few years and brought them up when they're 12, 14 months of age, and they seem to have adapted okay. They certainly haven't grown out to be a big 700 kg bull. But a question for both Justin and Mick and for Dan and Troy. You mentioned about bringing young bulls up sort of 5 months of age in May or June. You're going to be subjected to a pretty severe protein deficiency. Does it place an extra management pressure on the producer then to grow those bulls out at significant cost? And then what's the guarantee that those bulls will actually become a viable bull? Obviously there's a certain percentage of bulls that don't make a bull for one reason or another, for failed semen test or scrotal size or conformation, those things. So that's my first question. And the second one is, are there any Angus producers in the south working to use cooperator herds in the north to maybe get around those issues of bulls adapting to the northern conditions?
Yeah, thank you for your question. You make a very good point, and I've seen cases where young bulls don't necessarily work because they've been put under too much pressure, nutrition rates have been a lot higher and whatnot, and some producers just don't physically have the time, or not so much physically, but they just want to go and buy a bull and get on with it. And at times I think there's a line there where you do need to grow that bull to a level where he can sort of handle himself on it. I mean, we're certainly not advocates for big heavy bulls, but certainly still grow that bull out and so he can sort of he's done most of it and handle himself a lot better. So I think there's I think if that suits your program better, that you go and buy a 2-year-old bull that is sort of presented well but not overdone, then that may be the best option for you as opposed to the 6-month-old bull that you're not sure. You've got to put him in a nice paddock and grow him out. That's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, 5 to 6 months would be far too young as far as I'm concerned, but because their room is still developing, they are requiring that high protein diet, as you mentioned. But yeah, I still believe getting them up there into that environment, getting the flora working in their room, on the herbages or whatever they're eating, is going to put them in good stead. And I suppose at the end of the day, if the bull can do his job, he is going to be subjected to environmental stresses, which is going to. He's not going to express his full genetic potential if he was on full feed, I suppose, up until T years of age. So he certainly won't be the bull that he could be under a pretty harsh environment. But providing he gets the job done and gets the genes into the herd, then I think that's his role.
I think also it's a case-by-case thing. Just whatever fits your operation, how you find it work the best. And it's such a broad topic, and everyone's situation is a little different. And just the best way that you feel, as long as you're achieving the goals that you set out to achieve, and getting the conception rates you want, and all of that, well, happy days.
Just to finish off, Justin, do you get any feedback from commercial bull clients on longevity of Angus bulls going into the north? I mean, is there a trade-off in terms of their typical working life compared to another breed option?
I guess the safest way to answer that one would be there's as much variation within the breed in between, but yeah, certainly it's such a sometimes you're just going to get a variation. Sometimes you get a bit more, sometimes you get a bit less. That's just radio, I think,
Right. Look, let's thank Justin for his input this afternoon before he peels off with this other community here. So, Justin, appreciate your input today. So let's move on. Have we got some more? Here we go. Carol's got one down back here.
Just further to mix Harry Olsen's Angus. To your comment about North and South cooperators, we've sort of done it both ways. We had 500 or 600 cows in Woodawitty, so really that's north, but we still had the variability of the heat. So we had 500, 600 cows total AI for 7 years. So really for AI we just did 2 synchronised rounds, and so they started the basic Victorian cows that came up, and those cows adapted really well because they were properly developed when they were young. And I think the key to the adaptation to me is the weaning and rumen development. And it doesn't really matter whether it's done in WA, Victoria or Queensland. You've got to have that weaner developed. So we had that Whitney place was sold, we moved a lot of those cows back south. And a lot of the Queensland cattle we thought were tougher because they weren't weaned properly or adapted. They stand out still in Victoria now. They're not as tough, they're not as productive, they split weight quicker. So you can spot the Queensland cows, and that's just because they weren't adapted. So our Victorian cows adapted better than, and it was because they were actually developed in droughts in Victoria, but they were developed properly. So I think the key is that early weaning, and then those bulls can go anywhere. You're still going to have the heat, and it's still better to get them up north when they're young. So that was just a comment on that. But in terms of getting back to the value-based marketing side of things, I mean, that's been really our frustration with the Angus breed and probably the Angus Society for 20 years is that we do a lot of engineering cattle. We've been selecting carcass traits for over 20 years. We've been 100% AIET with a strong focus on balanced production of a carcass for that long, yet most of our clients still get averaged. If you look at Gardner Angus Ranch, look at their website, they've done a good project on, they call it the Southern Project, which is using Angus cattle over Boss Indicus in the south. And those cattle, I think, I haven't looked at it for a while, but there's $40 or $60 a head more on the grid because we yield and meat quality. Plus, we saw some good figures up here. There's obviously the weight gain, some weight gain advantage as well. So in Australia, we just keep rolling forward, and the industry's really going back. We just keep missing those opportunities to change. So, my question to some of the Angus side is we just rolled over the CAAB licence, but I haven't seen anything about grids or value-based marketing. That's where that program started. So in the US, with the top-end Angus genetics, you can make $150 above the cash price. So even if you lock in a zero margin feedlot, if you sell your cattle on grids, you can make $150. You can also lose $100. Most people, those sort of cattle, just sell them the commodity game. But there is clear potential to differentiate. So some consignment of Angus cattle can make average $70 or $80 above the cash price just because of what we talk about. Yield, grade is much more important. And market. So, my thing is we're all trying to do things as individuals, but it'd be good to see, like the CAB licence just got rolled, and that to me was the perfect opportunity where we should have negotiated grids or we should have let it go. And we've been promised CAAB grids for 10 years. When the CAA started, we were actually selling cattle on the grids, so we were getting $70 or $80 more for heifers that could marble school 3 and 60 days of feed off grass. So there's clearly an opportunity to differentiate. There's a massive bell curve in Angus genetics between yield and marbling. But my question to the Angus Society, why are we wasting another opportunity just putting a brand on a box?
Thanks, Harry. I'm not sure if anybody wants to provide a comment on Harry's point. I think it's, most processors probably widely concede that they, on their 100-day cattle, they do go into the chillers and cream the chillers for the higher marbling carcasses and do something different with them with a different carton blend that means that they make money out of those cattle. So it's a matter of how that money is shared around the industry. So do we have another question for the panel? Yes, Sonia's got one down the back.
Tom Gubbins from Tamani Angus. I'd just like to, in my experience, commercial producers do get paid for meat quality, and in Victoria and New South Wales anyway, perhaps there's something to do with the critical mass here, which could be a question to Troy, or that perhaps you haven't got an Angus critical mass here in the north yet to give realisation to the processes that there is a differentiation. But it's not always rewarded at a best price. It's often rewarded in no marketing costs because the process is ringing you for your cattle. He takes the whole lot, gives you the best price on the day, and sometimes they even tip in and pay for a bit of trucking or something to sweeten the deal up. So, you know, in my experience, they don't like paying more money because you race down to the pub and tell all your mates to give the phone number out to the processor who sold it, who bought them off you, and they don't like that. So they prefer to give you little treats rather than pay you more money. But is possibly the Angus critical mass is not here in Queensland yet? Did anyone add on that?
We get enough of other people's feedlot grids and they get emailed around a fair bit, and we get our own. And you do see, I've looked at the feedlot grid for a couple of weeks, but you do see some of the feedlots put an Angus premium on there, you know, 5 to 15 or 20 cents, plus 15 for flatback blacks or, you know, whatever other comments. So we do see it in some feedlots, not all. And then some that have got branded programs through those feedlots as well. Through abattoir, probably not as much, and I don't want to get into the CWA argument at all, but from an outsider looking in, we used to hear talk in the industry about Angus premium, I suppose, for carcasses more than we probably do I feel and see now. But we do see some grids come through with an Angus premium on them that come through. So, but I suppose just back to the question before, and I know I said about sending young bulls north. Yes, you have to look after them. If you don't have the country to put them on, don't send them north. It's pretty self-explanatory. I do agree with developing the rumen, but if you go and put a 10 or 12-month-old bull or even a bit younger in the build-up in November in Northern Australia, they're going to get smashed. So putting them up there with decent feed, you know, at 5 or 6 or 7 months of age in May, June, if you can, to build their way up and build up, they've still got another year at least before they breed. Not putting them up there trying to breed at 12 months of age. But if you can't place them up there, I know it's hard to bull sales because you want information back and you've got to work with producers, and sometimes the bulls aren't there or not, or they want them seen and tested or whatever. But we do find our own bulls. The sooner we get them north to acclimatise, the better they are when they come out to 2.5-year-old.
Anybody else? I guess Carl's got one here.
Yeah, my name is Franks. I'd just like to point out the premiums at Bindaree and Inverella are now giving 5 cents premium to Angus on all Angus carcasses except bulls. They're giving a 20-cent premium now on 60 or better MSA. So, and all the feeder grids are giving a premium for Angus. The other thing is very hard for CAG, as it is now known, is that the processors want their own Angus brand. That's a bit of a problem in negotiating with them. So the CAG's negotiated with TFI, but lost cargo. That's just one thing. The other question for Ced is variation of tick resistance. I'm just wondering that if there's any work been done, or whether he's got the gut feeling, or whether there's evidence within the Brahman breed that there is a variation in tick resistance.
That's tick resistance, yeah, or heat resistance?
Ced.
Tick resistance? Yes, there is. There's a huge variation in it, and I don't think that we can tell on a phenotype. And that's my point, is that I'd love to see somebody in the north, ticky country, breeding Angus, to put that selection pressure on to adapt them to this environment. There is a huge variation in that. You said you can't pick it on coat type. Yeah, I don't think. And it seems to be separate to fire resistance as well. Some cows are fire resistant but carry a big tick load and vice versa. So, but I don't know anybody doing it.
So is there any variation within the Brahman breed?
Yes, there is. Absolutely.
There was a well-known paddock trial carried out at They had high and low tick-resistant types within the herd. They selectively bred those. It didn't have a lot to do with Cape type, so it wasn't as easy to pick as you might imagine. But certainly, even within a tropically adapted breed like Drought Masters, there was considerable difference in adaptation. And the belief then was, this is 10 or 15 years ago, was that that principle basically applied across all breeds. Yes, Sonia. You and Murdoch.
Just to put my question into context, fertility in the north hasn't really been fertilised that much. One of the reasons for the desire to introduce Euro and British genetics into the north is to address the issue. One of the things that we get from northern producers in a feedback sense is we're worried about black. We're worried about black going into the live trial. So my question, probably related to what Troy and the other members do, is do you see the market, the live market changing? And I'm hearing about growing demand for black. So that's the first question. The second question relates to the issue of reward for the Angus or superior genetics. Prior to saying that, the reason we chose Angus is because clearly they are a long way in front of all the other breeds, British breeds, when it comes to genetic advancement, etc., etc. So that links to the first question about is black an issue. The second question comes back to what about reward for the genetics? And so in the longer term, do you see breed rationalisation occurring so that in 10 or 20 years' time, there's 4 or 5 major breeds emanating particularly from Northern Australia, whereby if you breed black, you are going to get a premium because of continuity of supply. Which means the feedback I get from some of the processors is it's not predictable. The supply is not predictable. You give me a predictable supply, then we'll talk about margin.
So, I'm going to answer it in a few different ways. I used to be a feedlotter in New South Wales, a couple of different feedlots, and some of the worst performing cattle I've fed have been black cattle as well. Now, I don't know whether they were Angus or not, but I think there's some great, on average, the Angus breed I think is a great breed of cattle. I really like them. Not saying at all, but be careful about the black premium because there is lines of black cattle out there that aren't yard lean, they aren't tailed, they have poor structure, their rumens aren't developed, and they give you a bad name. So, I don't know whether Angus or not, but there is black cattle that don't perform that well, and in Northern Australia there is as well. So, I think good cattle and variation between breeds is a challenge and an opportunity for the Angus breed. In terms of live export, and I can't speak on behalf of all importers and all exporters, but I used to be an exporter of cattle and now an importer of cattle and producer. Certainly I haven't had a trouble with black cattle. There is some feedlots in some parts of Asia and some markets that they have a perception or a value for different types of cattle. It depends on what their local herd is or what their instruction is. So there's places like Surabaya that love red cattle. They red Brahmins, they want heavy red cattle because of Simmental influence through the local Brahmin herd years ago. Those red Brahmin cattle and parts Simmental trade. So there's some areas that are customer focused that want red cattle or want grey cattle, but broadly we're seeing more and more feedlots in Indonesia taking 50% to 25% black breeding with their Brahmins. They can't be hairy, they can't have curly hair on their head. Most Indonesian importers will look at the head of an animal and it's got curly hair on its head. It's going to have curly hair on its body. It might sound funny, but those cattle really don't perform in humidity and heat. And a cool day when you're in a feedlot in Indonesia is as warm as this room is here. So really be careful about hair type in Indonesia. I hate feeding cattle with curly hair in Indonesia. They don't perform. They cost us a lot of money. Slick cattle. If you're going to target the fastest growing markets in the world for beef production with live cattle, be really careful about hair because it makes a big impact on the feeding cattle. So slick hides really do have an impact. And look at the head of the cattle as an essential for that cattle. In terms of premium for Angus cattle and premium for good quality cattle, I look at it when I was a cattle buyer. You can ring up and go, I've got 90 Nexus steers and can I get a price upon curry? That is the most amount of information you get. They don't tell you how old they are, what breed they are, what they came out of, what sort of bulls they've been buying, what they yard wean, what they tail wean. If you market a commodity, you're going to get a commodity price. If you was they benchmark every month. We get a report of all the suppliers, how do they perform, ANG, FCE, and then we will target those cattle appropriately based on how they perform.
Okay. Just while Sonia's coming across, just expand a little on Hugh's comment there earlier, talking about the processor premiums. Both G's and JBS have made references, fairly public references in the last few weeks about their intentions to expand their Black Angus programs. When T's finished up with the CAAB process, they quite clearly telegraphed their intention to expand the T's Black Angus brand, including some greater levels of killer bean meat. And of course, JBS, its recent acquisition of Scone, will be more or less 100% grass-fed. We understand that they clearly told us that there will be an extension of their Angus kill down there as well. So both those big corporate brand programs are showing clear evidence of expansion. Now, where are you, Sonia? I'm just lost track. Oh, there you are.
Bryce, well, my question probably to Troy and anyone else on the panel would like to throw it in. Do you really feel that the black cattle in the north, as far as heat tolerance, is a problem? You mentioned yourself that you've actually investigated using reds a little bit, Troy, in that situation. So do you think black cattle can handle the heat and in the environment, both even only as a terminal, but as an F1 female?
Broadly, yes, I think they can, but it takes a fair bit of management around that. It is hard to really measure, but I think on the Barclay and places like that, broadly, yes. Objectively, it's probably a challenge to measure calf survival. We tried doing some calf survival measurements a few years ago, and on a couple of stations we've got, I know they've got little calf hutches for the calves to get under near the water troughs, and they're probably also a small sport for the dingoes to come and pick the calves off on a hot day as well. You could argue, but I mean, I think you get the feedback from the staff that the black bulls can be pretty hard to muster, and once they work out how to get in the dam or get into the litter, they can be pretty hard to get out. A lot of bulls are like that if you get them too hot, but I think broadly it's manageable. I suppose, John, to throw to Christian, maybe the Christian works more northern cattle than most of us. He might have a comment on it as well. I think it's manageable. It might be on your question, but I'd be interested in what Christian has been in Northern Australia. So.
Well, I think it just gets back to totally the management. We've probably had the Angus bulls at Langclon Station, Cloncurry. We're joining about 100 Angus bulls a year. And it just gets back to totally the management. We definitely have to look after them a lot more, but, we try and get them out of cows by the middle of the year and put them in a little bit program. So, they're definitely geared up to, ready for the next joining season. But, we are seeing great results in our weans. So, a big question I feel is what we do with that F1 female. That's sort of the unknown. We're just simply using it as a terminal cross. But, in the north, how do we manage that F1 female? What do we join her to keep her going? So, that's what
John, we're probably going to keep, we're going to have a go with about 1,000 F1 Angus females from the, we're going to push some into Kimberley and then some through the NT and some north of Cairns this year to see how they handle it, what their reproductive rate is.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left if anybody has a pressing question to finish up with. We seem to have covered a lot of territory today, so it's been good. I think we've managed to answer a lot of those practical questions that people are looking for answers for. But does anybody have a last question or two before we finish up?
John, could I throw one in there?
Of course. Okay.
We get feedback about pollenness and the benefits of those. What is pollenness really worth? Have any of you made the sums and thought, that's probably worth a few dollars, or not really?
What about you, Dan? You would have read more about one cattle into a time?
No, it's pretty hard to measure what it's worth. It's certainly worth. Well, to me, I think it's worth quite a bit. It obviously reduces losses from dehorning. It reduces workload. It's going to become a important factor in us being more acceptable as an industry to the lobby groups. It will no doubt increase their influence on our animal husbandry practices. It's really hard to put a dollar value on, but $5, $7, I don't know ahead to know, but at least it's a significant, it's worth a significant amount, that's all I can say. Troy will have a...
Can you finish the study for an ag economist at some stage? Do you take workplace health and safety, bruising, and it depends how widely you cast the net. Troy, have you got a comment?
I did a bit of work on it with a couple of staff a few years ago, and it was we had to sort of take a few averages, which I don't like doing, but we reckon there's a couple of percent mortality, calf mortality in it, particularly if you're trying to remother dehorned calves, which I really don't like doing. I'd rather just leave them later. So there was mortality, certainly dehorned calves get attacked more by dogs because they can smell them, and the other challenge, I suppose, is weight gain after that. So I think we thought it could have been at least $15 a head, but it was hard to tell. But again, single trade selection is always a challenge. We all know we shouldn't do it. But I think the whole of the industry will move towards that. I think I think Ewan asked a question about will we end up with a couple of breeds in Northern Australia, and I think if we keep pushing down, chasing poles, chasing fertility, chasing some carcass compliance, there is the potential to probably have 4 or 5 broad composite breeds that are topped up by pure F1 breeds. You look at much of the Queensland herd, it's predominantly a crossbred composite. Yeah. So I
think you wanted to make a comment as well.
Well, just really dehorning as an animal welfare issue probably could potentially be the biggest cost to the industry. So, by introducing pole genetics, it's going to alleviate a fair bit of that. There will be backlash and a heavy one. I'm surprised they haven't been on it already, but it'll come home to roost at some stage, that's for sure.
Okay, we've got time for one last question. Anybody would like to throw their hat in the ring? Anybody out there who's like just about reached the bottom of the barrel? Okay, well, I think on the strength of that, we've had a good session. Thank you so much for your attendance, and I'm sure we all picked up some interesting perspectives from our speakers today. So would you join me in giving them a round? Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, John. And also, just on behalf of Angus Australia, I'd like to thank John very much for an excellent job again. There was something in that for everyone, I'm sure. I'm sure everyone's learned something this afternoon. That was the purpose of the exercise. It was very insightful information given to us. And again, thanks very much to our panellists for offering us their time this afternoon. So thanks very much.